And so welcome everyone. My name is Lakey Love, and I am a co-founder of the Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation, and very honored and humbled and sad to be here tonight, but very honored and humbled to work with my colleagues and partners and allies and giving you all a presentation on the defense of trans medical care. So defending trans medical care in the state of Florida is not a one-time event or battle. It will be ongoing, especially the targeted attacks against trans youth in the state by the governor, the legislature, local school boards, Moms Demand Action, and Florida Citizens Alliance, and others. It's just a myriad of attacks across the state. So welcome everyone. We really appreciate you being here. We have a ton of information for you. And if you registered for the event, which you must have if you were here, then you will receive follow-up information. If you are going to the Board of Medicine meeting, we thank you strongly, especially those of us that are pretty much a couple states away from you, up in North Florida and Tallahassee, and we're like Emily in the Bay County area, which is even farther away from Miami. So we appreciate you all showing up. But there's also a lot that you can do if you can't go to Friday's meeting. So, and we're gonna inform you about that and let you tell you how you can get involved. So without further ado, let me share my screen and get started. We will start by introducing ourselves and the presenters today. I'm Lakey Love. I use they, them pronouns, and I do identify as a trans non-binary person, and I'm a co-founder of the Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation. Crystal, if you can introduce yourself.
Hear me? I got new headphones. Are
Yep.
they okay? Yeah, all right. My name is Crystal Siscon. My pronouns are she, her. I am cisgender. I'm the parent of 3 gender diverse children and an activist for trans issues in Florida.
Great. Carrie, will you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Fight. My pronouns are she, her. And to steal Lakey's words, I am an honored and humble ally for the fight for trans and gender expansive and queer lives. Happy to always be honored to be part of meetings and presentations by Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation with all the folks that lead that group on here. I am with Miami-Dade PTA, also co-lead Women's March Florida, and again, just real happy to be here with y'all.
And Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Gray. Pronouns are she, her. I am the transgender coordinator, transgender outreach coordinator for the Bay County LGBTQ Center. Also, and Lakey doesn't know this yet, but I'm also the interim president of the LGBTQ Center currently. So we're going through some changes. So we're restructuring some things. But so we got some fun things happening in Panama City. But also, I'm very proud and happy to be a part of this organization and able to do advocacy for all groups.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to hear about those new updates in Bay County. All right. We're going to start with Emily. I know that a lot of you on here do not need this information, so we're just going to run through it very quickly. For those of you that, if everyone can put themselves on mute, that's not a presenter, thank you. For those of you that just need more information, this is a quick overview of basic definitions and concepts in the transgender, non-conforming, and gender diverse world. So these are the basic definitions we're going to be running through, and I'm going to let
Lakey, before you get started, because this is a common purpose space, and there are people from common purpose who are not aware of what our agenda is for tonight. And I would like to give everyone a welcome to the common purpose space, okay, before we just dive right into this. As everyone who is a member of Common Purpose knows, is that we come together in this space to meet everyone where they are, generate empathy and compassion and understanding of who we are as individuals, and a better understanding of other people and the circumstances that bring us to this space, right? It's a place where we tell each other's stories, we listen to each other's stories, and we hear from each other in ways in which we can advocate and on behalf of one another, recognizing each other's humanity. And I think that that is a necessary framework before we start to dive into where we are. And the reason why we are meeting tonight is not only is this our general meeting for Common Purpose, but specifically Emmy Kenny asked that we have a meeting about these issues because of what is coming up before the medical board on Friday. And so it's important that the members of the Common Purpose community see and recognize what we're facing with respect to an imposition on our autonomy as individuals, and as on our autonomy as just human beings, and the impositions that are coming before us in this current government that we have and we're existing under. So I just wanted to create that framework for people who are from the Common Purpose community coming into this space and not necessarily are being introduced to this information for the first time, so that they have an understanding of why we are coming together to understand that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate that. And thanks for interjecting and explaining to everyone. This is a, Florida Coalition was asked to put on the presentation by Emmy Kinney, and then we just sort of incorporated it so that others in the public could also join, so that we're unpaid volunteer advocates, and most of us directly impacted. And so repeating trainings multiple times can get kind of exhausting. So thank you everyone for being here. And again, we are humbled and honored, and we'll get started. Emily's just going to run through some real quick definitions so that we're all on the same ground. And for those of you, again, that are directly impacted or in community, sorry about this. This is just bringing our allies up to speed.
Hi again. Yeah, so these, I think everybody here probably knows the definitions, but we'll go through them just in case. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat, or if you wait to the end, let me know. So without further ado, it looks like Lakey has already skipped a couple. I'm not sure if she did it on purpose. She's going forward.
Sorry, it won't let me go back when it takes my home.
Okay.
On
Sorry.
let me go back.
I've got this.
Stop the share or stop the presentation view. It's just the way Zoom works with.
Okay. I mean, if you want to, or I can just go with my notes. I have them all in the notes too.
Sorry, y'all. I don't know why it does that. It won't. The back button won't work. And you will go up on the slide. And let me get back to sharing my screen. It's funny. Okay. view slideshow.
Perfect. All right, so the definitions we're going to go over, we'll just go over them one at a time, and I won't go through the list. So sex is often misconstrued with gender, but sex is separate from that. It's a socially constructed classification of people based on certain biological characteristics. That's usually when people say they're AFAB or AMAB, assigned female, or other such terms. It depends on what makes people comfortable, but they're usually assigned a gender at birth based on their external anatomy, and it's not completely accurate because there's many things that are added in there, such as chromosomes, hormones, reproductive organs, and gender identity. Birth assignment's not always correct, and sometimes it's people are intersex and they actively choose which gender you're going to be. So sex is not gender. If we hit the next one, Lakey, we have gender. So these are out of order from my notes. That's fine. Gender is the socially and culturally constructed attitudes, feelings, expressions, and behaviors that is the U.S. Oh, the us associated with. I'm reading the thing I said U.S. The us associated with sex classifications of male and female. Gender comes in a range of body identity and expression categories of masculine, feminine, androgynous, and or fluid ranges, or all or none of the above. It is a big spectrum. It's not just a linear spectrum. It's a huge just bubble of whatever we are. There's a number of different gender identities. Sexual identity is how you define yourself sexually. This is more about who you're attracted to. Part of that includes sexual orientation. On the other hand, sexual orientation is your sense of sexual romantic attraction or lack of sexual or romantic attraction, depending on how you identify.
And just
yeah.
Just add to that, right? Sexual identity and sexual orientation are not the same thing.
Right.
Bisexually is not your sexual orientation, and it can include a range of things. And so we tend to use the broader term sexual identity.
Right. Thank you, Lakey. So now we got gender identity and gender identity and gender expression. So your gender identity is your internal sense of your gender and or your sex, like who you are as a person, and not who people are assigning you as. Not your outward appearance, it's who you actually are. Since it may either be of binary categories, or it can be in the non-binary range, which is in that spectrum that I was speaking about. For transgender people, their birth assigned sex is inconsistent with their gender identity. It's important to note that an individual's gender identity is completely separate from their sexual orientation or sexual preference, which is often misconstrued. People get that mixed up a lot, and it's very important to know that they are separated. Gender expression, the external manifestation, of one's gender identity, usually expressed through masculine, feminine, or gender variant behavior. This is what you use to present yourself to people. This is how you feel, and you take that and you internalize it, and then you put it in a package and you give it to people and say, "This is me." That's the way I see it anyway. I know a lot of people see it differently, but that's how I feel like my expression is how I'm trying to let people see who I am. And people will often look through your expression and say, "I don't agree," and they still will misgender you, and try to assert their own stereotypes on there. Transgender people, like their cis counterparts, may adopt their stereotypical or non-stereotypical expressions. I'll note here too that if you're not trans and you don't know and you're an ally, because a trans person does do very stereotypical feminine or masculine things, does not mean that they are mocking or pretending or overcompensating. I get that a lot. Sometimes they're like, "Wow," cis women will be like, "Wow, you act more feminine than I am," and like, oh, wow, women don't really act like that. That's what you think women act like? And I'm like, no, that's how I act. That's me. I'm just being me. I'm not trying to play a part here. So that's weird. I just wanted to throw that in there because it's very frustrating when that happens. Okay. You're muted, Lakey.
I'll throw into with you, Emily, that again, gender identity and gender expression are two different things. You can be a femme presenting non-binary person. Just because you're non-binary doesn't mean that you're androgynous. Just because a trans woman doesn't mean you're feminine. And these are totally different things. The way you present does not equal the way you identify. So.
That's true. It does often. I have seen it happen the opposite way. For me, I think about it in my terms, and I forget sometimes to say the other side. But yeah, some people do. They will present an outward expression that isn't in line with their gender, and when people see that, really gets confusing, and they're like, "Oh, what? I thought your pronouns were she, her. Why are you wearing those shorts and a t-shirt? Like what do you? Just let me be me." Okay. So yeah, thank you, Lakey. Good looking out there. All right, so next we got transgender, which is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or gender expression differ from the sex they were assigned at birth. Transgender people may or may not decide to alter their bodies hormonally or surgically, and may be of any gender. And that's very important to note too. Just because you're not medically transitioning does not mean that you're not transgender. There's a lot of gatekeeping on that, but you are who you are, and people should respect that. And just because people don't doesn't mean you shouldn't respect yourself. And I know that's hard sometimes. It gets very hard, especially if you don't medically transition. There's a lot of people that struggle with that. Gender nonconforming, genderqueer, and gender non-binary are three terms that are pretty much synonymous, but there are some differences, and it depends on your own personal definition sometimes too. But these terms are used by some people who experience their gender identity and gender expression as falling outside of the binary categories of men and women. They may define their gender as falling somewhere in between man and woman, or they may define it as wholly different from these terms. People often will use neo-pronouns or the non-binary they, or the singular they for themselves. There's a plethora of different pronouns. That's why it's important to respect people's pronouns when they give them to you and try not to question them too much. The term is not a synonym for transgender or transsexual and should only be used if a person self-identifies as non-binary or genderqueer. People who identify as gender nonconforming, genderqueer, or gender non-binary often prefer gender-neutral pronouns they, them, theirs. And that's often a safe way to go. Sometimes if someone is talking and they didn't present their pronouns and you're not sure, and you can either ask, which is very acceptable, and I encourage you to ask someone politely, or if you don't want to ask someone their pronouns, it's very good to just say, hi, my name is this and these are my pronouns, and usually that'll prompt someone and make them feel comfortable enough to share their pronouns. But Lakey's going to talk about that, so I will stop talking and hand it back over to Lakey.
And I want to apologize that this side says that we recommend all Democratic members, because I stole it from a training we did for Democratic legislators. So just a friendly reminder that a person's gender can be communicated through use of pronouns. We have a couple of members of Florida Coalition that don't use pronouns. So remember that not everybody uses pronouns, but respecting pronouns is a way that you validate somebody's identity. If you've ever been misgendered as a cisgender person, that you probably understand this. If you haven't been, then have somebody misgender you all day long, like have a friend or a spouse misgender you all day long and see how it feels. So it strips you of your humanity and it can get really under your skin. So we ask, and Emily mentioned this, right? If you haven't seen somebody in a long time, or you're introducing yourself at a meeting or public, if you want to be not just an ally, but an accomplice. You as a cisgender person, as well as if you're transgender or non-binary identify, will use your pronouns in your introduction. We ask everybody to do this so that very specifically we're tracing back to what we said earlier, which is that somebody's gender presentation is not always what you assume. Like, you can read from a person's gender presentation and make lots of mistakes, so don't make assumptions. And if you haven't seen somebody in a little while, you might want to check in and just say, hey, can you tell me what your pronouns are now, right? Because people change, people come out, and people come out, I guess is a better way, or people try on pronouns. And I know that sometimes this, early in transition, we can try on one pronoun, and then later we're trying on another, and one feels comfortable. So just make sure that you're respecting people's pronouns, and that you're using pronouns in your introduction to undo cisgender privilege, and also binary privilege, because every time I have to say that I use they, them pronouns, I'm coming out as a trans non-binary person, because of the world that we live in that doesn't respect they, them pronouns. And we have Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation, which again is the state's leading trans-led advocacy organization. We'll ask you to not use, sometimes when you fill out forms, you see this, people saying preferred pronouns or preferred name. Nope, those are our pronouns. This is our name. It's not a preference. It's not a choice. This is who we are, right? Just like you have a name, you have pronouns, we have names, and we have pronouns. It's not a preferred pronoun. It's just my pronoun. It's not my preferred name. It's just my name. So please don't use the word preference. It's misleading, and it's also prejudicial and discriminatory. Removes the veracity claim that our identity markers hold. All right, Carrie is going to lead us through some depressing stuff and just a little background on patterns of discrimination, and then we're going to roll fairly quickly into the focus on trans medical care.
Of course, my dogs just started barking, but I think they're quieting down, hopefully. So, okay, hopefully y'all can't hear that too bad. So the National Center for Transgender Equality has done some research. They have a national transgender discrimination survey, and they found that discrimination was pervasive throughout the entire sample, but that the combination of anti-transgender bias and structural racism was especially devastating. As you probably all realize, people of color in general fare far worse than white participants across the board, with African-American transgender respondents faring worse than all others in many areas that were examined. Another finding is that they found that respondents lived in extreme poverty, that trans folks are nearly 4 times more likely to have household incomes of less than $10,000 a year compared to the general population. Some more statistics, that 41% of respondents of the National Trans Survey reported attempting suicide, compared to just 1.6% of the general population. And then with rates rising for those who lost their job due to bias being 55%, those that were harassed or bullied in school being 51%, and those who had a low household income or were the victim of physical assault, 61%, or sexual assault, 64%. It also found that those who expressed trans identity or gender nonconformity while in grades K through 12 reported extremely high rates of harassment at 78%. Those who reported physical assault were 35%, and 12% reported sexual violence. Harassment was so severe that it led to almost 1/6, 15% of folks to leave school in K through 12 settings or in higher education.
Joe.
Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate that. So some more patterns of discrimination, and somebody is off mute. Some more patterns of discrimination. As a result of discrimination, hate crimes, and bullying, transgender and gender diverse individuals experience higher rates of mental health challenges, with anxiety and depression experienced at nearly 10 times the rate of our cisgender peers. Furthermore, according to the Trevor Project 2021 national survey, so this was taken after the pandemic, obviously, LGBTQ mental health, it was a survey focused on mental health. 54% of trans and non-binary youth reported seriously considering suicide within the last year, and 29% had made a suicide attempt. So Florida Department of Health's answer to this was to release a guidance that pushed back against medical care and social transitioning for youth up to age 25. One of the reasons that we've included these extra slides here is because Florida is an outlier in its attack on social transition. So the attack on transgender youth medical care in general, and trans kids and trans youth, we have some more information on that, is massive and is increasing every month across the country. But the Florida Department of Health's guidance on trans medical care is working to prevent social transition support for gender diverse youth up to age 25. This is a precursor to criminalizing parents and mandatory reporters who support gender diverse youth and who offer institutionalized support, including healthcare for youth who do not identify as cisgender. This will also deny the kids the chance to receive support for social transition in public schools, as well as healthcare and mental health facilities. Some talking points in favor of supporting social transition and letting kids come out and socially transition at home and in school. According to the Trevor, this is Crystal. I almost went right on top of you, Crystal. You get to do the good stuff.
Yay. This is talking points in favor of social transition. And I want to say that this is really crucial. This saves lives. According to the Trevor Project report, transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse youth who reported having pronouns respected by
Crystal, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now? Hold on. Can you hear me now? All right, I'm just gonna take them off. Can you hear me now?
That's
Better.
All right, I got new headphones. I'm sorry. According to the Trevor Project report, transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse youth who reported having pronouns respected by all of the people they lived with attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected by anyone that they lived with. And transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse youth who were able to change their name and/or gender marker on legal documents, such as a driver's license and birth certificate, reported lower rates of attempting suicide. And I wanted to say that this is true. This works. In 2019, the U.S. Center for Disease Control released a report after 3 years of study focused on transgender and gender diverse youth and resiliency. Transgender youth are more likely than cisgender youth to report health risks related to violence, victimization, substance abuse, mental health, and sexual health. Parental, social, and education support systems that support social and medical transition of transgender and gender diverse youth help foster resilience and better health outcomes amongst transgender and gender diverse youth. Key findings from the CDC report state that transgender youth report feeling isolated and excluded in school environments, and transgender youth express resilience by actively coping with these stressors through advocating for their needs and seeking out and finding connection with supportive staff and friends. I'd also like to point out too that supportive staff and friends is often many of the first people that gender diverse people come out to. Transgender youth report parents struggling to provide support specific to their gender identity, such as being emotionally supportive when youth came out to the parents as transgender, chosen name and pronoun usage, and assistance with social, legal, and medical gender affirmation processes. Transgender youth report facing challenges to accessing culturally competent and gender-affirming healthcare, such as a lack of provider knowledge or transgender issues and inconsistent use of chosen name and pronouns.
I actually wanted to add to that too. I'm sure Emily could as well, but for time's sake, I just wanted to say it's pretty terrible, especially in the mental health arena, when you're going and you're trying to seek help for a problem caused by discrimination, and then you have to train your therapist and this person that you're trying to seek help from is either ignorant or is misgendering you or reinforcing the norms, paradigms, and discrimination patterns. To that point where kids are saying that they're having to train people is true for adults as well. And frustrating.
Thank you for pointing that out, Lakey. I know we talked about this as a storytelling venue. When I share my story, I also experienced that, how difficult it was to find even mental health care while we were in crisis. Review and implement policies and practices to ensure inclusivity, take steps to affirm gender identity, intervene in bullying on campus, and provide or refer students to comprehensive affirming sexual health services. This is the exact opposite of the FDOH and Surgeon General Ladap's recommendations.
All right, I think this is me. I'm always here with the bad news. Thanks for that, Crystal. So again, trying to get you all some researched information on how to speak effectively at the mic on Friday, as well as in social media arenas and other spaces when you go to big groups. So there's been an unprecedented attack on transgender and LGBTQIA+ people in the last few years, especially trans youth and state legislatures across the nation in 2021 and 2022. And they actually started here in Florida in 2019. We saw we saw and defeated it was actually the second year the Parental Bill of Rights was in play. Which is what HB 1557, which we call the Don't Say or Be LGBTQ+ bill, is called in the legislature. So there were 36 states across the country, including Florida, that fought bills that specifically targeted transgender people. And I'm going to repeat that because people tend to think that the big attack is on LGBTQ people, as if lesbian and gay people are more under attack than transgender people. And I'm sorry to say that that's just not the case. Transgender people have been under attack in a much harsher way for a much longer period of time, but these specific attacks are really, really, really targeted at especially trans youth. Over 156 bills were working to criminalize trans youth in sports, medical care bans, and bathroom bills. 82 of those bills targeted transgender youth in particular. There were a total of over 300 anti-LGBTQ+ bills under consideration in state legislatures in 2022 alone, right? 13 states passed a trans youth athlete ban in 2022, up from 60 years before. Several of these were vetoed by governors, but many are still in place. 9 states across the country, including Florida, passed anti-LGBTQ school bills, and Florida's bill, the Don't Say or Be LGBTQ bill, was a targeted attack on transgender youth, despite top-line claims by LGBTQ groups, including Equality Florida, that denied that it was an outing bill for trans kids throughout session and after session. And so we started to see the school boards making an interpretation of the bill that was a targeted attack on trans youth. There have been multiple problems in the reading of HB 1557, the Don't Say or Be LGBTQ bill, because, and this is before schools even started, right? The bill was literally just enacted in law. It was signed into law, but it actually just started in July 1st, and we're already seeing Counties across the state doing things like using the bill to out transgender students to their peers. The first paragraph of the legislation requires that you out transgender students to their parents, but doesn't require that you out them to their peers. Here in Leon County and Tallahassee, they're using the bill to out transgender kids to their peers, to other parents, as well as to parents themselves. So even if your parents are in support of your gender identity, the bill is being used to out you to everyone, including other people's parents that might be hateful and aggressive against you. It's using, the bill is being used to deny support for gender diverse children whose parents don't agree with their identity, even if a teacher or staff knows your proper pronouns, your proper name, and they're going to lose their job. And in fact, in Sarasota County, we're seeing Duval County move that way, Lee County, there's a few other counties that are moving in this direction. And then we're seeing the bill used to force the outing of students through a state mechanism called the Gender Identity Plan registration that will put the transgender children on a Florida Department of Education register. So that when and if the governor decides to do something like pass a medical care ban or executive order, or the Florida Department of Health proceeds after this Board of Medicine to make it to criminalize medical care, and the kids will be outed in that register and then potentially attacked through state means. Just one note, Florida Coalition for Transgender Liberation has been fighting the name, quote unquote, "Don't Say Gay" of HB 1557 since it was first named that by Equality Florida to cisgender white men. I think in particular names the bill that. They have subsequently withdrawn the use of the "Don't Say Gay" term themselves. But we would like to remind you all that labeling a bill "Don't Say Gay" is exclusionary. It sets the LGBTQ plus community back by like 30 years, and it's also transphobic because it doesn't recognize the bill's impact on trans kids, gender diverse kids. It leaves out a whole sector of the community that is hit really hard. So please stop using the term "Don't Say Gay." And if you have to call the legislation something, call it "Don't Say" or be LGBTQ plus and be inclusive. Finally, last depressing piece of news, 39 states in total have passed anti-transgender, not anti-LGBTQ legislation in the last 3 years combined. That's 39 of our 50 states taking targeted attacks on transgender kids. And in the last several months, we've seen 9 states pass 18 laws barring trans and non-binary children from getting healthcare using gender-appropriate facilities, outing transgender children, criminalizing support for transgender children, and or blocking transgender children from participating in sports. These attacks are being coordinated at the national, state, and local levels, and they're being funded by corporate and religious groups in a very astroturf kind of way. So what you might think is a grassroots movement in something like Moms Demand Action is actually being fueled by the Republican Party and other big right-wing conservative groups that are funding these astroturf groups in the same way that we saw the Koch brothers and others do to stop clean energy and other things. One addition that makes Florida very precarious, I'm sure Crystal will probably talk about this a little bit, but that overview that I just gave was only about state legislation. It doesn't include executive orders, such as those released by Texas Governor Greg Abbott in 2021. He criminalized transgender youth medical care and made it felony child abuse for a parent who currently or at any time in the past has supported their child with the correct care and gotten their child gender affirming care for being transgender. Under Abbott's executive order, medical professionals, mandatory reporters, including teachers, nurses, firefighters, admins at school, I mean, everyone, right? That's every social worker out there, would all be arrested for a felony offense if they either as a healthcare professional offered gender affirming care, or as a parent got their child gender affirming care, or if they were a mandatory reporter and didn't report that the child was receiving or had received at any time gender affirming care. And we are expecting something that harsh or harsher to come to, more harsh than that, to come to Florida, as our governor likes to compete with the Texas governor, because they're both running for presidential election on the back of killing trans kids in 2024. And this is a key part of their campaign. All right, we're now going to dig in on the FDOH and Surgeon General's work in general, right? In particular, the FDOH guidance states that social gender transition should not be a treatment option for children or adolescents. And as this memo reads, it's linking in an article, and we're going to give you all of these resources. And if you signed up, we'll send it to you by email, right? So, an article called Not Social Transition Status, but Peer Relations and Family Functioning Predict Psychological Functioning in a German Clinical Sample of Children and Gender Dysphoria, published in a medical journal of clinical child and psychology and psychiatry. All 5 authors of the paper responded when Vice News came to them, and they issued a statement that Florida had egregiously misused their work, partly because the study involved a clinical sample that was only 54 children. And so together, collectively, they are stating that the results cannot be generalized, and that they didn't look at long-term effects, and that the way the Florida Department of Health is using their study and their inquiry is false and misleading, and that every child should have the opportunity to access and explore, resources and support to explore their gender. The U.S. Professional Association for Transgender Health have released a statement in response to the Florida Department of Health guidance that's going to be reviewed this Friday, as well as the Surgeon General's report. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but what's really important in their work is that they went through each of the things that were cited as medical expertise, or professional or white paper peer-reviewed articles, and they are debunking each one, right? And so any of you that want to go to the mic and use this information, please do. Also, just releasing the information to the public at large. And the FDOH guidance and the Surgeon General's paper relied on a reviewed article released in 2018 that included studies only through 2017 and didn't include 2 subsequent published studies with more solid evidence. So papers in 2020 and that came after this all showed that supporting social transition and getting kids gender affirming care lowered their odds of suicidal ideation, their potential for suicide, and that those who didn't get this treatment were actually at higher risk for mental health and suicide issues, which we've already brought up. So that is being confirmed in different articles that they're not looking at that come later and use larger samples. The DOH statement provided links to documents for 4 European countries that offered supporting evidence for Florida's position. But right, in the guidance neglected, as did the Surgeon General's report, neglected to state that 3 of those 4 countries actually permit hormone therapy and puberty blockers after appropriate assessment, which is what happens in the United States as well. You don't just get puberty blockers or go on hormone replacement therapy just because you just like any other medical practice, you have to go seek medical guidance with a qualified medical professional. So the Swedish policy is as bigoted as Florida and uses the same sort of misinterpretation. So we'll just sort of chop that up to the same sort of political pounding against transgender people in order to make a stronger, more powerful cisgender white male governor. Okay. Also, the term low quality of evidence that's used repeatedly doesn't mean poor quality research or evidence of harm. In fact, you talk to any trans or non-binary person, everything about us is under research. There's low quality of evidence because nobody pays for the research and because nobody will do it, just like people for decades and decades and probably still are under researching the way certain medications interact for Black women or other marginalized communities. So research studies on non-cis white people doesn't exist a lot. The typical research is on cisgender white people that fall in binary categories. And so just because there's low quality of evidence doesn't mean that that it's bad evidence or poor quality research, right? Finally, the original medical care ban passed in Arkansas has been challenged multiple times. It's been vetoed by a sitting governor, overridden by a legislator, and is currently on a stay in courts. And so as an issue, just like the abortion issue, this is something that the courts are in debate about. And for us to move forward as a state with banning medical care that has been legitimized by every major medical association in the country, and we will have those facts later for you, is a bit outrageous. All right, Crystal.
Sorry, my fingers weren't working. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal, and I am very honored to share this with you. This is actually the first time I've...
Crystal, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You can't, can you hear me if I hold it like this? Can you hear me if I hold
That's better.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. This is my first time I've ever shared this story. And I wanted to give an opportunity to the people in the room who may be triggered by talk of self-harm or suicide to mute me. And when I'm finished, I'll wave my hands like this when I stop talking about that stuff, and you can come back if you want. Is that okay? Does anybody want to mute me? Now would be a good time. Okay. My name is Crystal. I am a mother to 5 children, 5 tiny humans, and my 3rd child is transgender. And at the time where I live, we don't have comprehensive sex education in our schools. And I honestly hadn't been educated on what it even meant. And we found out through a very difficult way that unfortunately happens with many families, was my child got very depressed. They struggled. They didn't understand what they were feeling, and they tried to take their own life. And that was how we found out together that my child was transgender. They did it at school because they didn't want me to find them. And rather than call the EMS, the school called me to come to the school because they wanted to punish my child for attempting to take their life on school. And I rode in the ambulance to the hospital having no idea what was going on. And some very amazing doctors took me into a room and explained to me what was going on. And at the time, like I said, I knew nothing. And I said, well, what can I do to help my child? You know, I really relied on doctors to help kind of navigate me through this process. And I want to say that for my child, puberty was the onset, but I want to be very clear that there are children who are born who know. They just know. And we have to listen to them. I want to put that there. So my child was transitioning, was in crisis, and we were in a like a psychiatric emergency facility. And I met with some doctors and I said, well, what can I do? And they said, okay, we need to treat the anxiety, the depression, the dysphoria, and your child needs to have self-actualization. Self-actualization is being able to say, this is who I am, and the world agrees. So the first thing we did was what you saw the term social transition. And can I say, this is my opinion as Crystal. And for me, transition is transition is transition. We should not be saying social medical transition when we talk about my child. It is so rude to ask me if my child has had surgery. Please don't ask someone if they've had surgery. That is so intrusive. So I wanted to put that out there, please, as a parent, like just sharing my story. So part of transition is self-actualization. It's so critical. And I said, well, how do I do this? What do I do? And they said, well, they were going to cut their hair. They were going to transition the way they presented on the outside with their clothing. They were going to go to school. We were going to email their teachers, and they were going to use affirming pronouns. Pronouns are so important. I can't stress how important pronouns are. And my child was able to have a psychiatrist, a therapist. They had to have a general practitioner to give them a referral to even go to see a pediatric endocrinologist. And I want to say that was something that was really difficult for me because I was encountering denial of service. I didn't know who to call. My child was suicidal and they were sleeping on a mattress on my floor because I could not let them be alone. They were just in so much pain. Dysphoria is very difficult for some people. It's very, very painful. And I would call a doctor and say, I don't know what to do. And they would say to me that they couldn't treat me because it was against their religion, that they didn't offer any help. I didn't know what to do. And in desperation, I was Googling like transgender, and I found another parent who was a part of this organization who was on Facebook and said, here, this is what you can do. Go to this group, read this page. Like, I thank the universe every day for this community. So I was able to get my child the support that they need and get them out of crisis. And we were going to start a new high school, and we were going to completely transition where nobody knew, and everything was wonderful. The first year, the teachers were supportive. And then the second year, my child had to take a gym class because they wanted to develop their body to match their gender. And they were going to do weightlifting. And there was only 2 locker rooms available, one for boys and one for girls. And they decided that my child had to use the locker that they were assigned at birth. And I hadn't advocated, I hadn't known at that point what my rights were. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm sorry, this is difficult. My child had to go into the women's dressing room every day where the girls would scream at him, "You don't belong here." And he would hide in the bathroom and cry until it was time to go out to gym class, where he would come out an arch with the wrong gender, because there were two arches, one said boy and one said girl. And when he came out, the football team saw that he had come out of the wrong, and they force outed my child, and they started threatening his life. They scared him so badly, very graphically. They said that they were going to cut him from his throat to his stomach, and he called 911 from the locker room. And they called me again, and I rushed down to the school. And I was so afraid they were going to take him from me and put him in a mental facility. They were like questioning him. So I took him out of school at that point. I was like, he was not going back. That was it. That was the end of my child's experience with high school. He has never been to a prom. He's never done any of the normal things that, you know, childs get to do. And I took him out, and at that point I started working on, there was an anti-discrimination policy for the state that we were trying to get passed to protect gender diverse students. And we all worked hard. It took us 3 years. I worked on it 3 years to get it passed. And I kept seeing doctors. And after a year, we convinced a doctor that my child knew who he was. He had a psychiatrist sign a paper say he knew who he was. He had a therapist sign a paper say he knew who he was. We got to go to the endocrinologist. And at that point, we focused on stopping the dysphoria medically. There are many options, as we will find out, but basically just like a birth control pill to stop his period. We weren't giving him any sort of crazy treatment, but that was enough for him to not get triggered, that he could grow and get better, and we could work on all the other stuff. And he graduated high school, top of his class. He won an award for academics. He's a talented artist. He's going to college now, and he's really doing well. And when he became 18, he started taking testosterone, and he has been taking it for 1 year. He's been in college for 2, and he has friends, and everybody uses his correct pronouns and sees him that way. I am really afraid that they're going to pass this, and they're going to take his ability to get testosterone away. This is life or death for my family. This is not, you know, this is not like a lifestyle or anything like that. This, if my child does not get this treatment, my child could die. And I am not the only parent in this position right now, and adults too. This is very serious. And the other thing I kind of want to talk about is gender dysphoria is treatable. Gender affirming care like has saved my child's life. I can't tell you what it was like that night with the police when we were searching the canals. Like, you know, my child ran away. They didn't feel like they had options, and we were trying to find him because he was just so scared. And now we have this community, and we're all fighting together. And that couldn't have happened if we hadn't stopped the dysphoria and I had a treatment team of doctors and groups and organizations all behind me supporting me, you know. And I want to just like talk about the fact that this medical ban that they're talking about, and what Lakey was talking about, where they're arresting parents in Texas for providing gender affirming care. So I have shown to you that everything I have done was to save my child's life. I can't stop medicine that's going to save my child's life. And if that means like we have to go get that somewhere, like that's so many of us in Florida, what are we going to do? Like, this is life or death. And I wanted to like really stress that this is science, that we rely on science to help us. We have proof that it works. My child is doing beautifully. And there's no reason for all of these people to suffer for a political agenda. So thank you for listening to my story. And I just want to give everybody hope that once you get to be who you are, that happiness comes. All I want is for my child to be happy and for everybody to be who they are and be safe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Crystal. Ooh, I'm gonna breathe for a moment and then go back to the screen share. Thank you for that.
I'm really sorry about that. I know that was really heavy. I'm really sorry about that. I just feel like
Please don't apologize for telling the truth. Yeah, the truth.
It's
this
important.
here.
Yeah.
And we have a few more things that we're going to share with you all. I see a few hands raised. We're coming to the end here. Just a few more things, and I'll just try to run through them myself so that we can run through them. Essentially, sorry, it won't let me make the slideshow and see you all at the same time. So. All right, just a few scientific reminders about pubertal suppression and what quote unquote medical, and I agree with you, Crystal, we should not be talking about a difference between social and medical transition, like gender, it's fluid. And hello, everybody comes into their gender, right? Just some of us are cisgender and some of us aren't. So in high school and middle school, I don't know, I've never raised a kid, but I have a stepchild, and kids know what they want and go through various gender plays and gender expressions and different hairstyles and all kinds of things. So we all become self-aware if we're lucky. All right. So puberty blockers and are only part of a sliding scale of medical treatment and gender affirming care. It's important to remember that sex hormones do various things to our bodies. There's primary characteristics that we call sex characteristics, that those are the things that the doctors look at that externally present or internally present. And then there's secondary sex characteristics, including breast development, facial hair, these sort of things. When we block sex hormones, will often block things like breast development, facial hair, stop menstruation, do things that help stop the dysphoria. I'm sure both Emily and I could talk to you all day about the dysphoria that we've experienced as trans people. For those of you that don't know what gender dysphoria is or means, it's basically an uncomfortability or disdain for certain parts of yourself or all of yourself. Sometimes you can have dysphoria that's not about gender. For those of us that are non-cisgender, dysphoria generally focuses on parts of ourselves that are gender typical or gender stereotypical, that are either in the primary or secondary sex characteristic category. Puberty, so basically I just got through that. Gender dysphoria starts in childhood. It often gets worse as puberty starts, because little children can be pre-puberty can not experience as much dysphoria because they don't have as many things that don't line up with the way that they feel or that we feel about ourselves. Suppressing puberty for children who have gender dysphoria, and Crystal talked about all of this, right? It improves mental well-being, it reduces depression and anxiety, it improves social interactions and integrations with other kids when you're not being forced out of the closet by your government and school. It eliminates the need for future surgeries, which are costly, often not covered by insurance, and for some people like myself, completely unaffordable, even though intimately needed and necessary. And it reduces thoughts or actions of self-harm. Puberty suppression alone might not reduce or remove all of, it is important to remember that puberty suppression might not remove all gender dysphoria. And children should be monitored by pediatric endocrinologists in order throughout the process of gender affirming care. They also should be monitored by healthcare professionals in the mental health field if they need it. And all of these things will be blocked if the Florida Department of Health decides to make this more than a guidance and actually turn it into rule or law. Okay, top line messaging, and we'll go back and forth with Emily. I think we're running over a little bit, and so, sorry, we got started a little late, and then, it's a lot to tackle, but so top line messaging basically for Friday, and when talking about the trans medical care for youth in general, nearly all children who experience gender dysphoria in early adolescence continue to have a transgender identity throughout their life. This has been scientifically reported multiple times as far as the research allows, right? Which is to suffice to say that research on transgender people has not, especially on transgender youth, has not been well funded. There's not been a lot done on it. Therefore, you've got to go talk to us, those of us that lived through our childhood, and then people like Crystal's child who actually had support. I did not have support. And we're able to tackle the gender dysphoria at a youthful age. Misunderstandings about the needs of transgender children mean that many won't get the support they deserve, and the consequences can be tragic. We heard that in Crystal's story. Denying best practice medical care and support of transgender youth can be life-threatening. Literally, these kids are taking their own lives. Other kids are going to kill them, and the government is killing kids with this guidance. The Surgeon General is killing children, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. And the Don't Say or Be LGBTQ bill is killing children. It is not just about not talking about my two daddies and my two mommies in the classroom. It is about killing kids, right? Some gentle reminders when you're talking about, and we heard even do-gooder, well-meaning legislators on the floor of the Florida legislature that meant to be allies, using the aggressor's terms. So we want you to say transgender, non-binary, intersex, gender variant, and try to limit your use of sex assigned female at birth or sex assigned male at birth. It outs people. It also isn't very good terminology and reiterates this sex concept. And don't ever say biological sex, biological male, biological female, genetically male, or genetically female. I mean, for lack of better terms, it's BS. And it's made up loaded verbiage from the other side. And it's not only archaic, it's transphobic. And we had Democratic legislators using those terms 2 years ago on the floor of the Senate, actually, the Florida Senate. All right, every single major health organization in the country is, and I know this says Emily, but I'm just going to try to run through it, is in support of gender affirming care for youth, right? State legislation and executive order would prohibit us to do the actual process that medicine is encouraging and supports. Legislation like an anti-trans medical care ban restricts and criminalizes gender affirming care, attacks everybody who's within reach to support the kids, right? And to support transgender people in general. So we want you to say the government should not get between a parent, a child, and the medical professional. Use the language that they're using and send it back at them. We want you to say that what they're trying to do on Friday is government overreach. We want you to say that legislative or policy interference with necessary child medical care is wrong, right? We want you to use the term that this is interference in necessary medical care. And we want you to talk about defending parents and children's rights, right? Not just students' rights, but children's rights. Like these kids have rights too, right? They have the right to health care, including the right to bodily autonomy and privacy, which Article 21, Section 23, which we all know fighting the abortion ban in this state means that Florida has an extra strong privacy right? Don't ever say that you're protecting vulnerable children. That's using the language that they're using. If you do say that, make sure that you explain that their policies are doing the exact opposite of protecting vulnerable children. And I'm actually going to let Emily do this one because Emily gets to work and live with some trans kids. And I know that this is something that Emily cares deeply about.
Yeah, so always try to say that the child knows their gender and that they need support to be who they are, because it's true. And to say anything otherwise is not authentic, and it really hurts kids. A lot of parents do this for many different reasons, and they try to say, my kid doesn't know, I need to help them understand. Or other adults that don't have kids will say, no, your kid doesn't know, because people automatically assume that kids don't know anything. But if kids know anything at all, they know who they are. I think all of us, if we think back to our youth, always know who we are. Like we have a sense of our own identity. And it's very important that we foster that in all kids and help affirm parents so that parents don't feel weird about doing it. When you say the opposite, it makes people feel like they can't do it, or if they do it privately instead of publicly the way that they should. So always try to make sure that you support kids and their gender, and the parents that support their kids and their gender also. And never say that kids don't know, because kids know. I mean, they don't know math when they're 2, but they know who they are, and it's important to really affirm that.
Thank you. I don't know if Carrie wants to do this part or not, but it's pretty easy. There's a lot of things that you can do to help besides going to the meeting on Friday. And I'm sure as the Parent Teacher Association representative on this training that Carrie can tell you all about the aggressors, right? Moms Demand Action and Florida Family Policy Council, Florida Citizens Alliance, which is like.
Lakey, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I meant to ask, do you mean Moms for Liberty?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was like, no, Moms Demand Action, that's the gun organization. Yeah.
Moms for Liberty.
Just to make sure, yeah, make that point, yeah.
Moms for Liberty. And in Leon County, we have a Moms for Liberty chairperson on our LGBTQ advisory board. Sorry, you all. It's been a long day. And a long week when I put this together earlier. All right, contact your local school board, ask them for their current policies, expose their policies, get trainings into your local groups, including the trainings that we offer for free. Save everything that you have, share it with us, and so we can support your work, and track your opponent in your local area. Speak with local policymakers. We have a pledge card that you can have them sign, and have your local school boards, city commissions, and councils to pass resolutions We've in the endorsement slash like coming up into the voting process are already feeling through our county commissioners about creating programs for trans kids that are under attack in the county because the school board is limited on things that they can do. So, and educational programs for the community, right? And demand that your government pick up. Many of us are from quote unquote progressive cities. Some of us are not, like Crystal and Emily, and increasingly so Leon County, myself. So where you can, try to work with your local policymakers, your local school board, and speak with your Title IX coordinator, do FOIA requests. If you don't know what that is, Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation can run a training to teach you how to do a Freedom of Information Act request, know your opponents. And there it is again, Moms for Liberty, ask businesses to support you. Follow the same rules for local politicians and legislators by working to build local power. So the more local power you have, the more state power we'll have. If you don't have a human rights ordinance, put one into place. And again, have the politicians and leaders sign pledge cards, get them on the record. We have a silent sign-on letter that's going around about the issue. If you want to have your organization sign on, please do. And Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation can offer you legislative organizing trainings. We do a lot of work at the legislative level, and we will have yet again this year a Trans Youth at the Capitol Day. And we're also hoping at some point to put on a statewide advocacy training, probably in September and October. It'll probably be online. So learn how you can find out more about trans organizing led by trans people. Join our ambassador trainings that are often online, and get policy resources by joining and having your group join Florida Coalition, and then get communication resources as they come up. And now we're open for questions and answers, and I'm gonna stop the share. Thank you everyone for staying with us as we ran. I'm not quite sure what our time limit was, but I'm pretty sure we ran over time. So our panelists are open for questions. If anyone has a question, I think I see Michelle.
Michelle Drucker has a question.
Hi, what are you asking people to do on Friday at the medical board meeting? It says it's scheduled from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Yeah,
So
we're asking to go to the public comment period. And I know that Carrie is going to be there and can help. We'll send resources, but Carrie can tell you a little bit more about what's happening on the day. I'm in North Florida. I can't plan to come, but Carrie.
Yeah, so it's in the meeting, the medical board, so the Florida Department of Health, this proposed standard of care that we're talking about to prohibit gender affirming care, including social transition. It's being discussed at the Board of Medicine, the medical board building, which is that same entity in Fort Lauderdale on Friday at the Fort Lauderdale Marriott. That's their board meeting in that location it starts at 8 a.m. They did not allow, there was no process to sign up for public comment in advance. The ability, I guess, starts at, I've heard 7 a.m. to be able to get there at 7 a.m. and sign up for public comment for the meeting that starts at 8 a.m. I don't know if they're just gonna they'll probably at some point stop letting people sign up. I've also heard that even though they've estimated 3 minutes, that you might get 30 seconds, you might get a minute. And I don't know, other than that, if there's knowledge that much much clarity on it's the type of board meeting, like if you go to a school board meeting, or you don't know the agenda is there, but you don't know when the agenda item is going to get called. So a lot of us are just planning on being there all day. There's also a press conference being held, I think at 9 a.m. By Equality Florida. Also, we've heard a lot of just to be mindful of like Proud Boys type of nonsense, that they've been really, really aggressive. So everybody that is even thinking about showing up needs to be mindful about that as well. And yeah, that's really all we know. I honestly, Lakey, do you know if there's, they sent out this document, this proposed standard of care. Is there going to be an actual vote? I know that Eleanor knows this. I don't know, like, if there's going to be a finality about it on Friday, if there's going to be an actual vote, but there will be an ability to make public comment. I know that. Does anyone else have any more clarity about that?
Anybody knows, I mean, the agenda doesn't have documents attached, so we're not seeing, I'm not able to see a proposed rule. Like when the ACHA met, we also had the same question. We were trying to figure out if they were going to vote. And I'm not sure that anybody really knew.
The meeting is Friday at 8. Doors open at 7 to sign appearance cards.
Okay, and is it like just a handful of medical professionals or just handpicked people from DeSantis like Ladapo? I mean, is this going to be, like a rigorous debate among medical professionals, or just a thumbs up, thumbs down, we are going to allow this to go forward? Because that's what happens at the school board. They're not necessarily fully informed board members on every issue.
Yeah, I think certainly the Board of Medicine is appointed like pretty much every other board in the state of Florida, including the Board of Governors and the Board of Education, and by the governor. So these are handpicked bigots, I'm sure. That said, we should be, I mean, if you just let it happen, right, you're just gonna like let it happen without showing up. We do, I mean, every time we show up at the legislature, we know we're walking into the gates of hell. And honestly, people's apathy or their unwillingness to come to Tallahassee, and this time you all actually have a meeting that's down there, and so we're asking people to show up and make comments, rather they vote against you or not, right? The outpouring should be there.
Okay. Also, somebody in the comments said that Equality Florida had a link to send in a comment, and I've also seen that link too. And I just want to let everybody know about the. Nobody is 100% sure about these comments that you can send in, if they're going to be read there or if they're just going to be put on the record. It's possible they might be read, or it's possible that they just might log them into the record and not put them out publicly. So we're not sure.
Or release them publicly or read them out loud at the legislature. They have too much on the agenda. They're not going to read public comment out loud.
I don't expect them to either. They haven't said when we're there.
Yeah.
Nathan Broomer has his hand up, and Crystal, were you trying to get noticed? Okay.
I wanted to say.
Can you speak up, please?
Yes, I wanted to also say that showing up in solidarity is so important to the trans community that are there. Even if you don't speak, if you have a sign or use your body to just stand with them, stand behind them, just be there. That sends a message too. I wanted to point that out.
It also serves as protection. Thanks for that. And some of us have been physically attacked.
Yes.
Thank you, Crystal. Nathan?
Thanks, Maria. Appreciate that. For those of you I don't know, my name is Nathan Broomer. I use he, him pronouns. I am your LGBTQ advocate in Commissioner Nikki Fried's administration with the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. I'm also a fairly out and proud transgender man, and I'm doing the work here in my home state for a couple decades. So I can answer a couple of those questions that were brought up. 12 of the 15 appointees are physicians. They're all appointees of the governors. They come from all over the state, and there are several that we've done deep oppositional research on and are going to be remarkably problematic. And I don't want to get into the details, but there is clear there was an agenda set forth long before we got to this meeting. And I know that's not a surprise. As to finality on Friday, no one expects that to happen. And I'll tell you why. It has to do with the procedural requirements of rulemaking. So the Department of Health last Friday issued a petition requesting rulemaking by this body that actually sits within the Department of Health, but the Board of Medicine is a separate entity subject to the rulemaking procedures within Florida statute. And so what they could decide is to move forward. What has been recommended is the language that the Department of Health has put forward. Now they could go with that. They could go different direction. They could take less, take more. They could say no, but no one thinks they're going to say no. Let's be real. So when the next procedure begins, you'll be on a clock. And so as to those comments that have been sent in, I think that is likely where you'll see the submission of those comments, and you'll see folks like, Lakey and other amazing partner organizations saying, hey, heads up, let's start submitting comments. I know for the Medicaid hearing we just had recently that I attended, we had over 3,000 comments sent in, and some of those were hundreds of pages long, research provided by national and international researchers. So I will be there. If any of your beautiful faces will be there, I'll look for you. But just wanted to try and answer a couple of those, and anything else if you need. Good to see you, Lakey. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate you, bud. Were there any other questions? These are great questions, y'all.
Les Rifkin.
Yeah, I wear a lot of hats. One of the hats is being a realist. And people are going to be injured by these rules and regulations. They've already been injured. Given that, can we sue like Ladapo for malpractice because he is a physician, or some of these other doctors who are going to rule the wrong way? Can we sue them? Or can we even go up to the legislators and sue people like DeSantis for the people who are going to be at harm? Somebody's going to be hurt. That's the reality, as much as I hate to say it. So what can we do about it?
And so we're an advocacy organization, not a legal organization, right? And the problem with always relying on suing, especially in the state of Florida, is the courts are stacked against us. Some of this stuff that's happening in Florida is actually trying to drive a boat out of Florida into a U.S. Supreme Court. So Florida has always been a testing ground for bad things that happen. I wouldn't say that suing after the fact is the way to go. Again, we're an advocacy organization, so we believe in trans-led people power, and this is where we need our allies and coalition with us to come listen to us, to be guided by us, and then fight like hell with us. And it is definitely going to be a fight, but the only way to win is to show up and to be loud and to be proud and to support each other and keep each other safe. And I'm sorry to say that relying on lawyers after the fact, I mean, even with HB 1557, anti-trans legislation like HB 7, the major well-funded, mostly cisgender run legal organizations don't have transgender issues as a priority, and they're losing in a lot of ways. So I think it's important for us to try to turn out on Friday when it does move to rulemaking, as Nathan is suggesting. We get even louder. You do things like work with us to hold press conferences, to hold rallies, to show up in your go to your local Department of Health, right? Like, you all have county Department of Health. Go make a fuss there. Come to Tallahassee. There's a lot of things that can be done. Get leaders involved. Get people to speak out, especially in the big cities. Nathan, go ahead.
I wanted to share a little bit of good news. There's a reason, and likely he's right about everything that they said, right? There's a reason we're going in through this administrative procedure, right? If you track all the legislative history, even though We had all those states put forward anti-trans bills historically, none of which happened to be a bit pushed forward, by the way, before 2020. Like their attack is hard and fast, and it's all about the community, right? Legislatures have not passed most of those, and even some governors, Republican and Democrat, both have decided not to let them go because they want to get reelected and they know there's enough urgency and response. In our state, we're going through an administrative process without legislative oversight with intention by this administration, right? Because if we could mobilize, I think we'd see another outcome. The good news is, and don't love me less now by my admission here, but I'm also an attorney in the state of Florida, but Lakey's spot on, right? It's a slow, arduous process to take this to litigation. It will take years, and that will happen if it needs to. However, we had a decision in West Virginia yesterday on the Medicaid ban that they attempted to put in place there. That case has been litigated for years. Lambda won that, right? Georgia just settled on a Medicaid decision. So the thing we just debated, those are good indications. Like I really do want to give a little bit of hope. If we have to go that route, how do we stay the course and take care of each other in the next few years, if that's it? But it sure as hell would feel good to knock this down before we have to get there. So those are good indications from southern states, Georgia and West Virginia. This Medicaid attack, it ain't gonna fly if we have to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, but we gotta head this off at the pass because it's in front of us right now. So that's sort of the balance, good news, bad news.
Thank you for that. And on another bit of hope that's kind of like an off-key example of people power, but also the way Gen Z can organize on their behalf. So here in Leon County, our county are actually put forward by our LGBTQ advisory board yet again made national news because we put forward a measure that without so even if the parent is affirming in our county, if the child is in the space where they need a locker room or going on a trip that requires them to travel with other kids on a school sponsored trip or something, they had to agree to either a trans or gender nonconforming kid had to agree to either change or go to the locker room privately, which outs them, right? Supervised by an adult, or if they didn't agree to do that, the fact that they were trans or gender nonconforming would be sent to all of the parents of all of the kids in that class, or on the school sponsored trip, and they had to register for that gender identity plan, right? In order to sort of out themselves and through this whole process. Well, the Gen Z's response here in Leon County, a bunch of cisgender and straight kids are registering as trans and gender nonconforming in order to overload the system so that parents will be hit like with dozens and dozens and hundreds of letters saying, you have this trans kid in your child's class, blah, blah, blah. Like that, they're overloading the system. They did that all by themselves, right? That didn't come from us. That's not like something we self-designed. School hasn't even started yet. And they're flooding the system in order to overwhelm it. And so there's lots of things that we can do to mess with them, right? I mean, that's something that Gen Z did because they know the technology really well and they organized that themselves, and they did it through communicating on TikTok and Instagram and other ways. But I give that as an example, like Nathan gave the legal example, because that's like the kids using people power to fight a system that's trying to oppress them and showing up in solidarity for the kids that are actually directly impacted. So like putting your pronouns, where all of us, because all of us have our pronouns here, unless we tell you, you can't tell who's trans here and who's not. The kids are trying to throw the system and show it for what it is. So I think on Friday we can use examples like that as well to try to show, as well as crystals and other stories. So we believe in using science combined with narrative in order to show people that this is good science, the medical care, but also it really impacts people, and that when you show up and other kids show up for kids that are being attacked, it saves lives, right?
Camilla.
Hi, my name is Camila Jones and my pronouns are she, her. And I was wondering, when are we going to have these courses with the same content, but in Spanish? I think we really need it here in Florida. At least, I mean, I myself has a lot of friends that are mothers or fathers of transgender kids, but they only speak Spanish. And we really need this content to be spread and to be understood by them. And I mean, we will need to plan them with months in advance to spread the word and to get the quorum or the attendance we would need. But I think we really need to do the same in Spanish. So I would appreciate it.
Yeah, this excellent idea. Language oppression is real and alive in Florida. And we would love to cross coordinate with you to help make that happen. Florida Coalition is ready to throw down, and we have several Spanish speaking people within our cohort. If not, we can work with you all to hire a language interpreter. So we are happy to try to do that. We have all kinds of trainings, including just basic general cultural competency trainings, like how to be a supportive parent training. We actually have a training approved by the Florida Bar. So we have lots of training. So we would love to work with you on that. Feel free. I'll put my contact information in the chat, as well as the group's email in the chat. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much.
Camila, thank you for lifting that up. That goes for every initiative that we do here at Common Purpose. For members of the Common Purpose organization, does anyone have any questions specifically about where they see themselves plugging in? What do they see as helpful to them? What do they feel would be more helpful to their engagement? Please amplify that, as Camilla has.
May I take a second? Hi, my name is Erica. I use they, they, and she pronouns, and I'm a part of Common Purpose Initiative. I think that all of the presenters today have done an excellent job of not only giving us a general education for those of us who are starting from the point of needing the language and the acquisition of that power, to enable this conversation further and take it to this fight as it goes on. I also wanted to uplift the language competency that does have to be present, not only in Florida, but nationally, in order to comprehend the severity of this impact on not only Black and Brown individuals, but people who are going to be living in rural areas and communities where it's going to be less perceived as protected, given that the communities themselves that are expansively facing the most homelessness and the most violence are going to be those very communities who are experiencing also, as we said, poverty. So all of this is interconnected, and language is a very big part of eradicating that. So on that note, I just wanted to uplift that, and also to share the resources that Common Purpose has provided through not only the group that my friend and I have been, as LGBTQI led, working to produce efforts in Lake Worth for the same solidarity and We Stand With You in Miami, as well as throughout the state, of course. And I'm very proud of the coalition members who have made such a beautiful and open presentation to the groups that are present tonight. So thank you. But yeah, I would just like to make mention of the severity of not only the lives of children at this time, but also the generations of people that we can protect right now with this measured approach. With the hearts that we have full of this rage, we can move mountains, as a lot of my coalition members say. So in solidarity, if you'd like to come to these meetings in the future, we could, of course, expand this conversation to our communities and make this more possible within the intersectional dialogue.
Thank you, Erica. Chuck, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Maria, for calling on me, and thank you for this presentation. And so as an OG, a lot of the language I heard from the science was absolutely new to me. And I learned a lot from just listening to the science. Here is what's not new to me. The feeling and the pain of watching family members die because of racist institutions that is just killing us in so many different kinds of ways, and for so long, and for centuries. And how helpless I felt so many times when I've had to fight these battles. I know this battle as someone who's fought for liberation for Black people. I know that battle. And what I do know that as a Black man who's seasoned, I can't win Black liberation fighting that battle without finding out how to connect with the other affinity groups that we've identified in common purpose. It is my hope that I am more than willing to stand with you in solidarity around this work. Certainly I have to learn so much more. But Crystal, I watched in horror many of the same things you've said for my children, all right? I watched this, I watched my sons go to schools with real bright eyes, and I watched them as they died the slow death of an institution that doesn't affirm them, that don't value them. The fear I have when I come home, because I live this life as a Black man, so everything I experience, I fear my children experience it when they're out. Like, what happens if you get stopped by a police? And the humiliation of how to tell your children how to protect themselves and keep themselves alive by a sworn officer who is supposed to be there to serve and protect. So I know that feeling. I also know that these institutions are not going to change if we continue in these silos. I also know these institutions are not going to change until we understand what power is and how power is built. Common Purpose has 4 different affinity groups. The affinity group that identifies as Black, we know how to fight institutions, all right? Now, I'm not saying shit change because we can fight, but we damn sure can fight. And so just point us in a direction, and we're gonna go fight with you. Here is what will disappoint me, is that when I'm doing a Black-led action and I look around and I don't see it. Because too often that is the case, is that we in the affinity groups learn how to be allies, and to beat power, being an ally it's nowhere close to being sufficient to breaking the back of institutions that's been around for hundreds, thousands now, years of keeping folk like us with the knee on our neck, screaming to breathe, like Mr. George Floyd. And so we gotta find together. And I could do the same meeting, and I can guarantee you there will be those of you who are from this affinity group that will have, maybe because you're much smarter than me, you may not have, but you might not be, you might be just as smart as me, and may not have a whole lot of understanding of the language. I'm not asking you to understand my narrative. I'm asking you to understand that I want the same thing for my families and children that you want for yours. That's the common purpose. And so we'll find a way, if we choose to, connect there so that we can create a place that my grandson can thrive and have really bright eyes, because he's 9 years old and I see the light in his eyes beginning to dim. So I need you. I want to be there for you. Let's just figure out a way to beat this shit. Thanks, Maria.
Amazing.
Thank you, Chuck. And I really want to hold up what Crystal said in telling her story earlier, because that's what this space is for. I know that when we started this meeting, Crystal said that a person who was triggered by it could put their sound on mute, and that she would signal when she was done with telling her story. But that story is really, really important. When we started this group, I always said that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And stories are what gives people buy-in, and that shared lived experience, that shared humanity that we have, and recognizing each other's humanity. That's what this space is for. I will offer up a video, a recording of a meeting that we had much earlier, up in April, of a pediatric endocrinologist. Her name is Lisa Ector from South Palm Beach County. She's a pediatric endocrinologist, and she gave a wonderful, simple explanation of the medicine around hormone therapy in children, in trans children, and what these kinds of laws and these kinds of ideas do in terms of inflicting harm on our kids and our families, and our ability to explain and share in this lived experience that we have. But I just wanted to offer that up, and we'll be sending that. We can send that out as a clip of her explanation, because I think it's incredibly helpful without getting into the weeds of like I'm a doctor. Like, I've had medical training, and I don't expect lay people to have that kind of understanding of hormone therapy. And this was a great explanation of treatment and therapy, and the psychology behind it, the sociology behind it, that I feel is incredibly helpful for the average person to be able to plug in and have an understanding of the work, what we're doing. Michelle Drucker, your hand is up.
Hi, thank you. I had another question that I like to think this is a safe space that I can sort of pose this here. I feel that the strongest argument is that gender affirming care saves lives. When parents support their kids, the risk of suicide drops 93%. That's irrefutable. That's a fact. You just can't overcome that kind of just a staggering statistic. The question I have is, and that's related to gender dysphoria, particularly that transgender individuals have. I have a transgender daughter. But I guess my question is, how severe is dysphoria for someone who doesn't need, let's say, hormone therapy, or they're non-binary? I mean, I guess what I hear from parents that are making arguments that some that are appealing to others is like, well, we're talking about so many different genders now, and so many different labels that pronouns that people are using. And I guess the question is, do we focus on, no, I know this is not going to come out right. I guess if the suicide rates are highest for people who need the hormone therapy. I mean, isn't that the most compelling argument? I guess, how do we acknowledge the possibility that there are spectrums of risk involved with these populations? Is my question making sense?
It makes sense to me, but I'm thinking of it in an intersectional way. For me, it's your question, and I'm gonna, cede the floor to everyone else, but for me, and hearing what you're saying, I hear it in a very intersectional way. When young people are not recognized in their full humanity, they are at risk, right? And I see that, there were some things that were brought up earlier where I see reproductive justice in that, in the template, right? I see Black liberation in the template. And so I see it in a very intersectional way, what you're saying, and that we put everyone at risk when we do not recognize each other's humanity. And that to me is like a very fundamental thing that is so important when we're trying to do this work and trying to seek liberation for each and every one of us. Crystal, I saw your hand up, and then I'm going to go to Sheila.
I just wanted to respond to what you had said.
Volume.
I just wanted to respond to what you had said about the not sharing my story, people not listening. And I think that's actually a good educational moment, that when we talk about dysphoria, there are emotional triggers. There are things that can, seeing or hearing can bring a person who struggles with just dysphoria to that same place. So when I said that, I would like to be mindful that there are members in this room who could have not known what I was going to speak about. And I think we should always be mindful of the fact that dysphoria really impacts mental health.
Thank you, Crystal. Sheila, did you still want to speak? Emily has her hand up.
Yes, I do. Hi,
Okay.
guys. I'm Sheila. So the information that was given tonight was amazing, and I did learn a lot of things like Chuck did. Can everyone hear me? Great. I got a big mouth. I did learn a lot of things like Chuck stated. However, my concern is that I am a member of Common Purpose, and when I look at the screen, I don't see any Black or brown people that are coming in. And this is something that we need to lift up on this call, is that in the Black community, so it's hard being LGBTQIA plus, right? But then it's even harder being LGBTQIA and Black. But I don't see anybody on this call that's not a part of Common Purpose. So my suggestion would be to maybe market more so it can be a more diverse group, so everyone can get your message, because you have a really powerful message, but everyone doesn't have the opportunity to hear it. And that's my 2 cents. I did get a little sad. I'm looking at the faces and I'm like, well, this is Common Purpose. So don't miss that mark, because there are Black, transgender, LGBTQIA that are committing suicide. And guess what happens with that though? Our suicides don't get reported, just like our overdoses don't. So if they were in a safe space like this, we may be able to save their life. And that's my 2 cents. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Sheila. Emily, and then Megan.
Yeah, Sheila, I hear you loud and clear on that. That's very true. And I don't know how many people know that, but the intersectionality there with LGBTQ, especially trans, Black and brown people, they are marginalized way more than anybody. It's probably the most marginalized group that I can think of currently, and especially when you talk about suicides and even murders. When you look at the Trans Day of Remembrance and you look at all of the people that have died throughout the year, the big majority of them are people of color. They're not trans white women. There are some, but most of them are people of color. So yes, and we do reach out a lot to a lot of different communities. I'm not sure exactly why the people of color, the trans people of color don't show up as much, but we do reach out to a lot of different organizations, and we try to spread our message out there. So it's not from lack of trying, for sure. But if you have any ideas, we are always open to how to get our message out further. And also, go ahead.
Can I rebuttal back on it?
Mhm.
It's being in spaces like this. So being in the common purpose space where being very honest with you, right? If like I like anime, right? I'm gonna be able to draw an anime crowd. You have Black folks on this call. So being in spaces like this and not saying that I don't trust you because I don't know you not to trust you, you know, but having that trusted face to be able to say, you know what, come over here, we're having this call, I think you'll learn from it. So I wanted to just interject, but I'm going off camera and I'm quiet, seriously, for real this time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And to Michelle's question too about the dysphoria, and I just wanted to point out that yes, it does seem like that a lot of the talk goes towards trans people that medically transition or need feel that they need medical transition, and that's where the dysphoria comes from. That's not always the case. Dysphoria is a very tricky monster, and it weaves its way into many different areas of our lives, and even parts that don't require the medical transition. The dysphoria, and there's no way to really explain exactly how and when it all comes in. But even people that are 100% happy with their transition and where they are, still get dysphoria. So I don't know if that helps with what your question was asking, but yeah, dysphoria doesn't necessarily happen because of the medical transition side. And that's all I have.
Megan, and then Erica.
Hi, I'm Megan, she, her. I'm meeting a lot of you for the first time. And I just wanted to speak also to what Michelle had asked. And Emily is exactly right. Dysphoria is different for every person, and dysphoria isn't necessarily the driving factor for seeking medical interventions for transition. There are a variety of motivations that can go into that, and trying to compare amounts of dysphoria is pretty much a non-starter because there's just no way to quantify how much dysphoria a person is having. So the way that I try to approach it is I just trust people to tell me what they're experiencing and what they need, and I don't question them on that. As trans people, we get enough questions and we get enough doubt, and we have, the doubt is built into us. We doubt ourselves all the time. That's part of the trans experience. And so the best thing to do is just take people at their word. If they're telling you that they need medical interventions, they need medical interventions. If they're telling you they're having dysphoria, they're having dysphoria. You just need to trust that whatever we're telling you is the truth, because there's no motivation, there's no benefit for us to lie about any of this stuff. Everything that we go through further marginalizes us from the norm. So if we're saying we need access to medical care, that's making us different in additional ways. You know, for a lot of us, we would like nothing more than to not stand out. We would like to just blend in so that people don't pay attention to us, and that's really kind of the goal for a lot of people when they're looking at what they do for their transitions, just to find ways to minimize the amount of dysphoria they're feeling, for sure, but also finding ways to blend in so that they get less scrutiny from the rest of the world. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Megan. Erica?
I could not have said that better myself. because I did want to bring in for the scholarship of women, gender, and sexuality, and the way in which we can discuss the nuances of gender dysphoria. We can expound upon that in relationship to youth, and it is very important that we do recognize the language that the quote other side, but more so those that are antagonizing both the child as well as the human, as well as the trans individual, or the gender expansive individual, the gender nonconforming, gender variant, is given the opportunity to be dependent upon so-called unknowables. And these terms that are being antagonistic and used antagonistically are also terms that don't describe the true nonlinearity that sometimes is the gendered experience and can change throughout time with one's relationship to themselves throughout aging. And we know that the reduction of suicide rates is very important to the aging process. We need to have children make it to the time of their adulthood. We need to have Black children be able to make it to the time of their adulthood. We need to see children grow. And as parts of that, the conversation then becomes what medicalization or what lack thereof, what prospects of health do we actually have for those communities in need? And is the state providing them? No. So the nuance of dysphoria, I think, also comes with recognizing that the nuance of a child and the protection of a child is not only implemented by the parent and cannot be left to the parent nor to the state alone. And we recognize that also relying upon the child is a distinct mechanism of power here, right? So how do we invest in the child's voice? I would add for the conversation of like non-binary dysphoria or just gender expansive dysphoria whatsoever under that umbrella term, because we really do want to develop research on the subject, and our children and ourselves as non-binary individuals, myself included, are that research. We can create memoirs and ethnographic narratives and ways of communicating that experience that do not leave us in vast ambiguity. So on the note of that, it's critical that we do understand our children and we do comprehend those nuances, even though it is so all-encompassing, and it is so nonlinear in that way, or can be. So I think that that's just something I wanted to interject. It's well worth our research and well worth the scientific investment, and that's precisely why we're here, arguing for this so broadly.
Thank you, Erica. Lakey.
Thank you, Erica. That was really well put. I just wanted to say as well that I think sometimes when we frame our arguments as defensive, as if some kids are expendable and some are not, or that some deserve more medical care because their risk for suicide is higher, or and then we keep going ... right? And that it undermines our claim to the fact that all of us deserve medical care, right? Healthcare should be a right. And when we're talking about healthcare justice, rather it's gender affirming care or not, right? What we're talking about is the ability for people to access equitable health care that recognizes their problem and treats them with a solution. And this medical care ban, as Emily and others have answered on the dysphoria, and there's not an either or on mental health and well-being versus physical health and well-being here. The body itself is intersectional, right? And that this particular guidance turning into a rule is also foreclosing the ability for trans kids to access health care that's mental health, right? So even if they're not seeking pubertal suppression or hormone replacement therapy, they should be able to. We heard Crystal say that it was the doctor that sat her down in the first instance when her child attempted suicide and said, this is what's going on, right? And then proper healthcare professionals helped guide her and a community of other parents, right? Helped guide her. And I think that, I feel very humbled to be here in this common purpose space. It does feel very safe. But I'm draining. And so if I have to leave and stop the recording, I'm really sorry. I'm being doxxed right now. For those of you that don't know that, it means that I'm being personally attacked in my home for the trans justice that I do, including my car being broken into. And it's been a long couple weeks, but I just wanted to say that that I think as in all intersectional problems and solutions, right? We're an all volunteer, unpaid, we're not even a C3 or C4. We're an all volunteer organization of directly impacted people. And I've seen so many of our people fall out for mental health and other reasons. And when people are being attacked on multiple levels because they're attacked because they're trans, they're attacked because they're trans women, so there's misogyny, they're attacked because they're trans women of color. It becomes harder and harder to show up. Even when a place is safe, it's hard enough for me, and I'm white and I have a job and a home, and so I just wanted to say that I honor that. In our community, it's really, really, really hard for trans people to show up and do these kind of things that are being recorded and throws them out in front of cameras. And so I just want to thank you all for bringing the truth here. Also, many of us that are in this coalition end up there's 3 states in this state for advocacy. We get left behind in North Florida all the time. And South Florida is like a whole other world, and vice versa. When legislative session happens up here, it's really hard to get people from down there up here. And so it's just, I think it's hard to come together. And I just want to say that I'm grateful to the people that did show up. The people that you see here got asked to put this presentation on by me 5 hours ago. And I scrambled to put the materials together for you all. So the attacks come hard, they come fast. And we're really grateful to be here, and grateful for the people that show up, and grateful also for the people that are doubly and triply and quadruply impacted that show up as well. And we honor that and recognize that you don't always have to be the person that's doing the fighting on your behalf. Racism is horrendous, and Black trans women and Latinx trans women receive the bulk of the impact.
Lakey.
Thank you, Lakey. Ray, and then Megan Fielder.
Lakey, thank you for sharing what you just shared. I have a question, and I do get it, why the trans community, you explained it so good a little while ago when you said that it's difficult for the trans community to show up because of certain things, and I heard that. So how do you show up for other communities?
How do we show up for the Coalition for Trans Liberation? Well, for instance,
no. So the question is, with common purpose and how we understand each other, and we try to stand with each other in solidarity for a common purpose, right? And Chuck mentioned how we show up for each other. But I just heard you, and I felt you just a little while ago when you say that it's difficult for the trans community to show up because people are there with cameras and so on and so on. I get it. I really do get it. This was so educational for me. I kind of wish you would have broke it down a little bit more, as if I were a 5-year-old, because some of the time the stuff was just over my head, and I'm a Black pastor, so I'm really trying to get it right. So if we're in a space that we're showing up for each other, and it's difficult for the community to show up, how do you show up? Or do we just show up for you and you don't show up for anybody else?
For instance, this, and so good question, and thank you for it. A lot of what we do is state level advocacy and legislation, right? This past session, the coalition that fought the top line anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ bills, we're also fighting the state's leading racist, quote unquote, anti-woke bill, and the coalition that stayed together for every action, for every press conference, for every coordinating meeting was the Florida Student Power Network, which is a Black and Brown youth driven organization, the Dream Defenders, and the Florida Coalition for Trans Liberation. And we lost some legislators as a consequence, white legislators that didn't want to hang with the anti-racism movement, and Black legislators that didn't want to hang with the trans folks. But we stayed together despite, including the state's leading, quote unquote, and most well-funded LGBTQ organization trying to undermine our hanging together in coalitions. So that's how we did it. We did it the way Crystal said. We showed up physically together. We stood by each other. Some of us, they tried to arrest us together. We do what we can, and we platform Black trans women when they do show up, and then try to pay them when we can. So.
Megan Fielder, and then Carrie Fight.
Hi. I was trying to refer back to Sheila's commentary and also just Ray's, because I heard the reasonings as why things break down they do the way that they are, but I kind of wanted to ask Sheila and anybody else who could answer, like, what are things that y'all might consider that we could do to help other cultures? Like, I really appreciated the Hispanic comment. Like, I believe in sign language and other things being something that I would love to actively see. But, and then as for like the organization side of it, I also was referring back to Ray. I feel kind of curious as to like what more can be done to work with different intersex, because we have statistics that 40% of neurodivergent people, autistic and ADHD, are trans and queer identified, and we know there's huge numbers on other places. And it is true that, you know, you go to a pride event or you go to a support event, and it is pretty white centric, and even having queer people of color and disabilities as friends, and being of disability myself, is very hard to figure out how to create a safe space for those people, and like how to give them a space to come out, and also feel like there's a reason to, like, there's going to be representation or education on how to respond if you are not able to represent in your area.
Maria, would you like for me to respond?
Sure, Chuck. Thank you.
So some of the places that we show up doesn't have to be like you showing up to an event to help me talk about police brutality. There's some things that is already common. And one of the places that we can really show up often and have already shown up is like at a school board meeting. And the two pieces of legislature that you just raised is just mutual. And one of the things that we can do is that when we do show up, we tag in our talking points each other. I mean, you speak to the issues you speak to, I speak to the issues we speak to, and we just make it clear. And what we did on this particular case, we wore common purpose shirts. And it was clear we were together. And we had a very vocal and active MAGA group who got uncomfortable as hell. We ran their ass right out the school board meeting by coming in together as pastors and all standing together. So some of it is, let's just find the places like this legislature where we got some common things and show up and speak in our authentic voice for the issues that impact us, and then chain it together so folk are real clear. Something's different going on.
Thanks, Chuck. I think it's essential that they can't come into a space and think that they're going to divide us and think that they're going to pit one of our groups against the other, right? Because we're all in solidarity with one another. And it's impactful and it's necessary that they see that there's absolutely no daylight between our issues, because our issues are about common humanity, right? And so that's how we show up. And for us as a group, it's absolutely necessary that we amplify that common purpose and that sense of humanity that we have, and tap into each other's empathy through through the storytelling, through the lived experiences, and recognition of that. Carrie, you had your hand up, but you no longer do. Do you have something that you want to share?
I was going to respond to something, but we've kind of moved on from there, so it's all good.
Thank you. Crystal.
Hi. I could kind of speak a little bit to what Megan was also saying. For me personal, in my experience, I'm in Lee County, and in Lee County, we didn't have any sort of organized community support. And it was when Trump had first got elected, and it was, you know, there was, like Marie was saying, they were dividing us up into us and thems. And I wanted to make sure that we were centering intersectionality in all of our movements. So I went and I joined the Black Caucus, and then we formed the Hispanic Caucus, and then all three of us worked together to make sure that we were at each meeting and we were supporting each other and showing up in the same spaces, recognizing that all of these issues that were happening were impacting all of us. And that way, when like something was happening that was targeting one particular community, we didn't get sucked into it. We all moved forward together, and we all kind of agreed that's what we were going to do locally. We formed this coalition, and we were going to make sure that no matter what happens, so we are moving slower because of it, but we're moving together. And I want you to know that we don't have like a written list of what our coalition stands for on the internet right now, but I want you to know we speak about making sure that we center this, that when I go out, that I am centering the most impacted voice, that I'm lending my support and standing back and lifting this up, that I'm not just thinking about myself, that I'm thinking about everybody. And I think that is so important, right? Because we're all being attacked. We're all, this isn't just like our issue. This is all of our issues. And when we frame it that way and we all move forward together, I want you to know that I hear what you're saying, and I do. I think it's so important. And I appreciate you reminding us about that, because, you know, we're all on this goal for liberation together. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Does anybody else have anything they want to share, add? Hold up, Carrie.
Yeah, I'm going to take back my past and just to honor you all in this wonderful space. I can't keep it down anymore. I just want to say that this is a wonderful space. To me, somebody who has a lot of privileges, and the way that I show up is I have also a great sense of empathy, and my familiarity, my community with folks different from myself, education, right? This is the work. This is how we show up for each other, and this is what y'all obviously are all about. So to me, this is how we show up. This is the work. Y'all are doing it. This is what this group is literally called, the name of your group. So this is an amazing space. I've seen dominant spaces slowly change and develop empathy for other lived experiences. A lot of my spheres of influence, it does happen. Sometimes you get beat up and spit out, but sometimes you can make a little space, and education, familiarity. Again, we're all the same inside. We're our liberation is tied in one another, and you all know that. And so I just wanted to thank you and say, this is a wonderful space again. And this is, to me, this is how you show up, and this is the work, and this is so important. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. Emmy, and then D-Ray.
Hi. So I just wanted to say first, I'm hearing everything that everybody is saying. And one of the reasons that I wanted Lakey and Lakey's group that they've built up and Common Purpose to meet and have this kind of mashup meeting is to bridge those gaps. LGBTQ safe spaces like advocacy groups, community centers, they are always very white. And it's a conversation I have with those institutions, I try to talk about it a lot because it's something that I want to help improve. And the people I talk to don't really know how to do it, but it's just, Sheila's exactly right. It's just by talking to each other and coming to the understanding that we're all fighting for exactly the same thing. So that's all I want to say. And just thank you so much for being open to that introduction and to Common Purpose for letting this group into your space, and to the Florida Coalition of Trans Liberation to show up and do this training on short notice. I learned a lot, and I think everyone learned a lot, and I'm just excited for you all to meet each other.
Thank you, Emmy. D-Ray?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been having technical difficulties all night with my phone. What's up, everybody? Part of my tardiness. Not sure if it's already been uplifted in the space. I've just heard on the tail end of a lot of talk about what can we do as a group. I'm not sure if we've spoken about the recall going on in Riviera Beach and the need for support explosively in the next couple of days. Maria Cole, just want to uplift you for a second. You are a gangster. You and Miss Cindy walking them streets. I mean, damn. But I've been there with you, Ernst. We've done a couple things. We need more people, and we also have a series of canvassing coming up, phone banking coming up. We have a forum tomorrow night, and support looks like showing up. Support looks like logging in. Support looks like sharing on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. Support looks like I can't be there, but I'm going to commit to getting some people there. Support looks like your events matter. We're going to be there to show up and just make sure that we're helping you fill out space and hopefully bringing someone that needs that information. That's what it looks like, and it's consistent. Part of solidarity and building coalition is building trust and love amongst each other, knowing that even if this doesn't strike at my heartstrings, the fact that it strikes at yours means that I'm gonna be here for you. I'm gonna be here with you. So I know that means that we can't always be there physically, and I know that we do some things in the background, but we can publicly express how everyone else should be doing that stuff in the background or the foreground if possible. And what's coming up for us right now that I can at least speak to, like I said, is a series of canvassing, a series of phone banks, a series of Super Saturdays where we tap into communities that are not normally paid attention to. And we're doing relational organizing. We're building relationships with these people. So I think part of the issue is if you commit, we need you to commit to being a part of that, really spending some time building with them. and being sensitive to that. And then we have trainings once a month where we talk about this ideology of radical inclusion, right? Where we have true democracy. So I just wanted to uplift that, put that out there. If there is anyone seeking to tap in any way, these are the ways that you can tap in. And reaching out to Common Purpose, we can inform you of where you need to be. Reverend Ray Whiteley and Faith in Florida are leading a forum tomorrow night, that having people share on their Facebook and social media and having them pack out and pay attention to can draw more support from within our community and within your community, and then the community of those you love, because it's not always just about the people you can directly reach, but who those ripples reach out to. So I'm done with my spiel. Appreciate all of y'all. We stand in alignment. I hope it was a good meeting. Glad to be here and honored to share space.
Thanks, Dee. One of the things I want to offer up, and just a little bit of insight in how we built this space, is that I think that we all come into the world with in our lived experiences with blinders on to a certain extent. Like you don't know until you know, and you're not aware until you're made aware, right? And it's about like who you come in contact with and how you share experiences and empathy and care and love, quite honestly. One of the things that has helped us to build this space and to create the kind of dynamic that we have of radical inclusion is a lot of us, if not all of us, have participated in racial equity training. There is an organization out of North Carolina called the Racial Equity Institute. They do a lot of work with Palm Beach County School Board. And they offer trainings in how to literally recognize your blinders so that you can remove your blinders, right? Having people of color and a diverse body in your organization isn't enough. It's about having them in leadership. It's about having their full participation, it's not tokenized. It's about their full participation from a different perspective, a different history, a different story. And that's what builds radical inclusion. So I only offer that so that when we ask the how did we do this? How did we build this? What do we do now? I will offer that as like a place to start foundationally is in, and I want to offer it as and recommend it as like a group exercise, because even that is helpful, because when you go through that kind of training together and you can have dialogue and you can have conversations about it to understand like the different dynamics and the different perspectives, I think it helps to demolish the barriers, and it helps to build this sense of radical inclusion that we try to emulate, in this space. But I want to thank you guys. Does anyone else have anything to add or ask me any questions about like what we do here? And but like I said, if you're Camilla.
It's just a question.
Sure.
I read in one of the slides that Moms Demand Action is one of the organizations against LGBT. Moms Demand Action?
No,
that was a mistype. It was supposed to be Moms for Liberty. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I'll correct
okay,
it.
good to hear. Okay.
And
thank you.
I just wanted to say, just real quickly, I'm sorry, you all. I have Crohn's. I'm overexhausted. I'm usually asleep by now, and I want to stay and continue the conversation, but I'm beyond the beyond. And so for self-care reasons, I'm going to have to hand host and stop recording and step off. This has been a wonderful experience for me personally, and I really am grateful for you all and all these questions and this wonderful dialogue. And I just want to thank you so much. But for health reasons and for self-care reasons, I'm going to have to retire and step off. Thank you so much for having us, and we'll send you all an email with the information. Bless you.
Thank you, Lakey. Rebecca, you had a question.
I was just going to ask for some information on your organization. I came in through Lakey's group. I'm in St. Augustine, Florida, northeast Florida, and I would just really love some information on your group and what you're up to.